familiar with that letter?
I've read about that letter, yes.
And some of the individuals who signed that letter, the statement of former prosecutors, are people you worked with. Is that right?
Quite probably, yes.
People that you respect?
Quite probably, yes.
And in that letter, they said all of this conduct, trying to control and impede the investigation against the president by leveraging his authority over others, is similar to conduct we have seen charged against other public officials and people in powerful positions. Are they wrong?
They have a different case.
Do you want to sign that letter, Director Mueller?
They have a different case.
Director Mueller, thank you for your service, going all the way back to the 60s when you courageously served in Vietnam. Because I have a seat on the Intelligence Committee, I'll have questions later. And because of our limited time, I will ask to enter this letter into the record under unanimous consent and yield to my colleague from California, Mr. Liu.
Thank you, Director Mueller, for your long history of service to our country, including your service as a Marine, where you earned a Bronze Star with a V device. I'd like to now turn to the elements of obstruction of justice as applied to the President's attempts to curtail your investigation. The first element of obstruction of justice requires an obstructive act, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'd like to direct you to page 97 of Volume 2 of your report. And you wrote there on page 97, quote, Sessions was being instructed to tell the special counsel to end the existing investigation into the president and his campaign, unquote. That's in the report, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That would be evidence of an obstructive act because it would naturally obstruct their investigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Let's turn now to the second element of the crime of obstruction of justice, which requires a nexus to an official proceeding. Again, I'm going to direct you to page 97, the same page of Volume 2, and you wrote, quote, by the time of the President's initial one-on-one meeting with Lewandowski on June 19, 2017, the existence of a grand jury investigation supervised by the special counsel was public knowledge. That's in the report, correct?
Correct.
That would constitute evidence of a nexus to an official proceeding because a grand jury investigation is an official proceeding, correct?
Well, yes.
Okay. I'd like to now turn to the final element of the crime of obstruction of justice. On that same page, page 97, do you see where there's the intent section on that page?
I do see that.
C. All right. Would you be willing to read the first sentence?
And that was starting with
Substantial evidence.
indicates that the president's.
Yeah, if you could read that first sentence, would you be willing to do that?
I'm happy to have you read it.
Okay, I will read it then. You wrote, quote, substantial evidence indicates that the president's effort to have Sessions limit the scope of the special counsel's investigation to future election interference was intended to prevent further investigative scrutiny of the president's and his campaign's conduct, unquote. That's in the report, correct?
That is in the report, and I rely what's in the report to indicate what's happened in the paragraphs that we've been discussing.
Thank you. So to recap what we've heard, we have heard today that the president ordered former White House counsel Don McGahn to fire you. The president ordered Don McGahn to then cover that up and create a false paper trail. And now we've heard the president ordered Corey Lewandowski to tell Jeff Sessions to limit your investigation so that you stop investigating the president. I believe a reasonable person looking at these facts could conclude that all three elements of the crime of obstruction of justice have been met. And I'd like to ask you, the reason, again, that you did not indict Donald Trump is because of OLC opinion stating that you cannot indict a sitting president, correct?
That is correct.
The fact that the orders by the president were not carried out, that is not a defense to obstruction of justice because the statute itself is quite broad. It says that as long as you endeavor or attempt to obstruct justice, that would also constitute a crime.
I'm not going to get into that at this juncture.
Okay, thank you. And based on the evidence that we have heard today, I believe a reasonable person could conclude that at least 3 crimes of obstruction of justice by the president occurred. We're going to hear about 2 additional crimes. That would be the witness tamperings of Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort.
All that,
I yield back.
the only thing I want to add is that I'm going through the elements with you does not mean that I subscribe to what you're trying to prove through those elements.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The gentlelady from Arizona. I'm sorry, gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mueller, over here. Thanks for joining us today. You had 3 discussions with Rod Rosenstein about your appointment as special counsel, May 10th, May 12th, and May 13th, correct?
If you say so, I have no reason to dispute that.
Then you met with the president on the 16th with Rod Rosenstein present, and then on the 17th, you were formally appointed as special counsel. Were you meeting with the president on the 16th with knowledge that you were under consideration for appointment to special counsel?
I did not believe I was under consideration for counsel. I had served 2 terms as FBI
Okay,
director,
so the answer is no.
and the answer is no.
Greg Jarrett describes your office as the team of partisans. And as additional information is coming to light, there's a growing concern that political bias caused important facts to be omitted from your report in order to cast the president unfairly in a negative light. For example, John Dowd, the president's lawyer, leaves a message with Michael Flynn's lawyer on November 17th of 2017, November 2017. The edited version in your report makes it appear that he was improperly asking for confidential information, and that's all we know from your report, except that the judge in the Flynn case ordered the entire transcript released, in which Dowd makes it crystal clear that's not what he was suggesting. So my question is, why did you edit the transcript to hide the exculpatory part of the message?
Well, I'm not certain I would agree with your characterization as that we did anything to hide.
Well, you omitted it. You quoted the part where he says we need some kind of heads up just for the sake of protecting all of our interests if we can, but you omitted the portion where he says without giving up any confidential information.
Well, I'm not going to go further in terms of discussing the...
Well, let's go on. You extensively discussed Konstantin Kilimnik's activities with Paul Manafort. You describe him as, quote, a Russian-Ukrainian political consultant and longtime employee of Paul Manafort, assessed by the FBI to have ties to Russian intelligence. And again, that's all we know from your report, except we've since learned from news articles that Kilimnik was actually a U.S. State Department intelligence source, yet nowhere in your report is he so identified. Why was that fact?
I don't necessarily credit what you're saying occurred.
Were you aware that Kilimnik was
I'm not going to go into the ins and outs. I'm not going to go in the ins and outs of what we had in the course of our investigation.
Did you interview Konstantin Kilimnik?
Pardon?
Did you interview Konstantin Kilimnik?
I can't go into the discussion of our investigative moves.
And yet that is the basis of your report. Again, the problem we're having is we have to rely on your report for an accurate reflection of the evidence, and we're starting to find out that's not true. For example, your report famously links Russian internet troll farms with the Russian government. Yet at a hearing on May 28th in the Concord Management IRA prosecution that you initiated, the judge excoriated both you and Mr. Barr for producing no evidence to support this claim. Why did you suggest Russia was responsible for the troll farms when in court you've been unable to produce any evidence to support it?
Well, I'm not going to get into that any further than I already have.
But you have left the clear impression throughout the country through your report that it was the Russian government behind the troll farms, and yet when you're called upon to provide actual evidence in court, you fail to do so.
Well, I would again dispute your characterization of what occurred in that proceeding.
In fact, the judge, considered holding prosecutors in criminal contempt. She backed off only after your hastily called press conference the next day in which you retroactively made the distinction between the Russian government and the Russia troll farms. Did your press conference of May 29th have anything to do with the threat to hold your prosecutors in contempt the previous day for publicly misrepresenting the evidence?
What was the question?
The question is, did your May 29th press conference have anything to do with the fact that the previous day the judge threatened to hold your prosecutors in contempt for misrepresenting evidence?
No.
Now, the fundamental problem is, as I said, we've got to take your word. Your team faithfully, accurately, impartially, and completely described all of the underlying evidence in the Mueller report, and we're finding more and more instances where this just isn't the case. And it's starting to look like, having desperately tried and failed to make a legal case against the president, You made a political case instead. You put it in a paper sack, lit it on fire, dropped it on our porch, rang the doorbell, and ran.
I don't think you reviewed a report that is as thorough, as fair, as consistent as the report that we have in front of us.
Then why is
The
contradictory
time of the
information
gentleman has
continuing
expired.
to
The
come
gentleman from Maryland is recognized.